آقا امروز بازی استنلی پارابل رو قراره بریم بازی بکنیم. یکی بازی شبیه همون دکوریدوره، خود بازی کرم میریزه، با اون حرف میزنه، ما کرم میریزیم بهش. امیدوارم خوشتون بیاد. برو بریم. زیرنویس انتخاب کنید. ژاپنیز دایچی و فومشیمت. نه داداش انگلیش. قبلا استنلی پارابل بازی کردی؟ دروغ چرا؟ دموش یه چوسه بازی کردم ولی نباید بزنیم دیگه. زمان الان تو بزن. چیکار به این گوخوری ها داری؟ 6:45 بعد از ظهر. بیا. چقدر این منوش حاجی چقدر سکسیه. کلیدا رو که بالا پایین میکنم روی کلید میکنم صدا این کیبورد قدیمی ها میده حاجی. شما دارید بازی استنلی پارابل اولترا دلوکس ادیشن رو بازی میکنید. بنازم برو بریم. کلیک تو اسکیپ. اوکی ببینیم استنلی چیکاره بود، چیکار می‌کرد، داستانش چیه.
Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427.
427 یادتون باشه.
427's job was simple.
خب
He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month
خسته
of
نشده
every year.
چونش
And although others might have
چرک
considered
نکرده
it
انقدر نشسته.
soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job.
لیوا اینقدر
Stanley was happy.
مطمئنی اینقدر مکس کردی؟
And then one day something very peculiar happened.
الان
Something that
جالب
would
میشه.
forever change Stanley.
خب
Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for
هیچ
him to
دستوری
follow.
واسش نیومده
No
که
one had
انجام
showed
بده.
up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this
همه
happened.
مردن،
This
زامبی شدن.
complete isolation.
برو خدا همین باش.
Something was very clearly wrong.
خب
Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
اومد رو من چیه داداش؟ آقا این یادتون باشه 427 شماره‌مون 427. امروز چرا هیچ دستورالعملی نیومده واسه من؟ ساعتم 11:20 روز دیگه، همون صبح. کلیک میکنم ببین. چه صدایی میده. چی؟ از دوشنبه ها متنفرم روی این کلیده نوشتم. این کلیده این لیوانه. خب چیکار کنم؟ الان کسی نیست که اینجا هیچ دستورالعملی به من بده. الو رئیس بیا سرشو ببین که آتیش گرفته بود
All of
کاغذه.
his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley
درم هم
decided
بسته
to go
شد.
to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
میتینگ روم باید بریم. اما یک چیزی هست تو این بازی که با بازی‌های دیگه خیلی تفاوت داره و اونم حق انتخاب فراوانیه که فکر کنم داشته باشین. چقدر قشنگ حرف میزنم من. به غیر از اینکه فوش میتونم و بلدم خوب فوش بدم، خوبم بلدم صحبت کنم. چاکر مخلص. تا زانو خمم من. نه زانوم اینجاست، تا زانو خم. گفت برو میتینگ روم ولی ما
No
میتونیم.
matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-worker.
من تا فردا بعد از ظهر اینجام. تو اینجا تصمیم نمیگیری من چیکار کنم. مثلا پشت این نمیشه. خاموش کردم کامپیوتر مردمو. بعدم اول بازی دیدین کاراش چجوری بود؟ نوشته بود کلید K رو به مدت 36 ثانیه نگه دار. کلید J رو 2 بار بزن. کارش کلا این بوده تو کل سال. چی نوشته؟ گفته روی این فنجون قهوه نوشته من کارمو دوست دارم، فقط از رئیسم خوشم نمیاد. آقا بریم میتینگ روم دیگه. سلام علیکم. برادر سلام. ریشو ببین. کیف کن. من قشنگ به درد کار اداری میخورم. خاموش کن اینو. ننت با مستشو بابات داشت پخش میشد رو این میتینگ روم. الان کدوم گورستون دره ای آخهش یه راست کلیک هم گذاشتن تو بازی نگهمیداری خودش راه میره. مخصوصا ما گشاداست. این بازی رو بازی کنید. بنده خدا ببین نمودار کشیده که مسخرهش کرده. عکس عمه‌شو کشیده رو صفحه. عمه ادیتور مهدی جهان.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors,
خب
he entered the door on his left.
مطمئنی؟ بیا کل بازی کرم بریزی بهش. هر چی اون میگه ما انجام ندیم. ما راست میریم. گفت چپ رفت.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well.
چاکریم.
Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it.
خب چیزی سر کار نیست. چقدر اون 4B9 همه عددن. این حرفه چرا کونه یه چیزا رو میگیرم که هیچ اهمیتی نداره.
Yes, truly a room worth admiring.
بله.
It had really been worth the detour after all. just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully constructed room.
چاکر.
Stanley simply stood here, drinking it all in.
نوشابه نداره؟ داداش یه نوشابه. فانتا نارنجی. آب معدنی.
Yes, really worth it being here.
دیگه داره اعصابش تخمی میشم اول.
Room so utterly captivating that even though all your co-workers have mysteriously vanished, here you sit looking at these chairs and some paintings. Really worth it.
کل همکارات معلوم چه اتفاقی واسه شون افتاده بعد تو نشستی داری مبل و در دیفالو میبینی تو اتاق.
To get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
مطمئنی؟ من هیچ کدوم از کارهایی که میگه رو انجام نمیدم. گفت اولین اتاق دست چپ ما اومدیم از سمت راست اومدیم جلو بیا.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago.
چاکریم مخلص. واو یاد نقشه کشی دانشگاه افتادم. حاجی من ریده بودم توی نقشه کشی. چه گیری دادی به من ریاضیم خوب بود فقط. چرا روی نکات مثبت من تمرکز نمی‌کردین؟ احمقا بیاین. الان درس رو ول کردم شدم یوتیوبر. الان هم نمیتونین بخورین. این خطاب به تمام استادایی که در رفسنجان کرمان داشتم من. رفسنجون میرفتم دانشگاه دیگه. رشته برق. کنون احمقی اصلا تصمیم.
I think perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here.
خب
I'm not your enemy, really I'm not.
میدونم.
I realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story. But in his eagerness to prove that he is in control of the story and no one gets to tell him what to do, Stanley leapt from the platform and plunged to his death. Good job, Stanley. Everyone thinks you are very powerful.
دور از اتاق اومد. فکر کردم حاجی اتفاق نمیافته گیر باشه. من گفتم برم بپرم اصلا پرش نداره.
I'm not your enemy, really I'm not.
میدونم داداش
I
میدونم.
realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time. There's someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. Someone you've forgotten.
کی منظورت خودته؟
Please, stop trying to make every decision by yourself.
میخوام
I'm
دوست
not
دارم.
asking for me, I'm asking for her.
هر کیه؟ من که مردم.
This is it, Stanley. Your chance to redeem yourself. To put your work aside. To let her back into your life.
کیو داره میگه؟
She's been waiting.
کی منتظر منه؟ دخترم هست. بالاخره زنگ گرفتم. خدا شکر. جامپ اسکر باشه نه. بسم الله.
That's her, Stanley. You need to be the one to do this. To reach out to her.
چشم بیا.
If you can truly place your faith in another, then pick up the phone.
بر نمیدارم. من حرف گوش نمیکنم. اسم من اسکورپرو داداش. باید بیای بخوری وسایلی که در یخچالم وجود داره. خب مثل اینکه هیچ راهی نداریم متاسفانه. بنازم به نورپردازی. یه دونه نور اون بالاست که فقط چپ و راست میشه. برداریم. الو سحر لبورت کن. 427.
Hold on, sweetie. Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm just pulling the bread out of the oven. All right. Okay, there we go.
نکن در خونمونه.
I want you to come in and tell me all about your day.
Gotcha.
پدر سگ.
Come on. Did you actually think you had a loving wife?
ای قرمس.
Commit their life to you.
پدر
I'm trying to make a
سگ.
point here, Stanley. I'm trying to get you to see something. Come inside. Let me show you what's really going on here.
اگه تو منو سر کیف میکنی منم تو رو سر ارتفاع میکنم. من اینور نمیام اینور میرم.
Sorry, but you're in my story now.
نه بذار برم دیوار رو تقه به دیوار میزنم برم تو. بابا ولم کن دیگه بیا اومدم. ممه.
This is a very sad story about the death of a man named Stanley.
چرا؟ رو کیبوردت سیو بزن من آرو میزنم. ایو دبلیو این اف تی این همه چیو زدم غیر از سی. بیا سی.
Stanley is quite a boring fellow. He has a job that demands nothing of him.
چرا؟
And every button that he pushes is a reminder of the inconsequential nature of his existence.
یا علی خودم هم نفهمیدم. اینکانسیکوئنشال این فقط این کلمه رو اینجا بذار بعد بکن تو کونه شرکت.
Look at him there, pushing buttons, doing exactly what he's told to do. Now he's pushing a button. Now he's eating lunch. Now he's going home. Now he's coming back to work. One might even feel sorry for him, except that he's chosen this life. But in his mind he can go on fantastic adventures. From behind his desk Stanley dreamed of wild expeditions into the unknown, fantastic discoveries of new lands.
وینلند ساگا.
And each day that he returned to work was a reminder that none of it would ever happen to him.
این لج افتاده با همون این گیم. هر کاری هم میکنم هیچ فایده‌ای نداره. هیچ حرفیشو گوش ندادیم دیگه. الان اینجا اون داره تصمیم میگیره واسه اون بی‌ناموس.
And so he began to fantasize about his own job. First he imagined that one day while at work he stepped up from his desk to realize that all of his co-workers, his boss, everyone in the building had suddenly vanished off the face of the earth. The thought excited him terribly.
اما بزنم که وقتو با بچه ها بگذارم. بچه کجاست داداش؟ نکنه با خودت بچه دار شدم. زنم که بودی سر کارم گذاشتی ولی من جدی بچه دارت
He
کردم.
imagined that he came to two open doors and that he could go through either. At last, choice. It barely even mattered what lay behind each door. The mere thought that his decisions would mean something was almost too wonderful to behold.
کلا ذهنی داره تعریف میکنه داستانو واسمون. واسه شام آماده شم.
As he wandered through this fantasy world, he began to fill it with many possible paths and destinations. Down one path lay an enormous round room with monitors and mind controls. And down another was a yellow line that weaved in many directions. And down another was a game with a baby. And he called it the Stanley Parable.
فکر کنم این داره خلاصه حاجی تصمیم گیریایی توی بازی رو بهمون یه طوری میرسونه ها. بعدم داره یه خوردم مسخره‌مون میکنه و انگلمون هم میکنه، نمیذاره هیچ کاری بکنیم. ولی هر بار کلیدو زدم یه سری چیزا تغییر کرد تو اتاق. وایو بزنم که به بچه‌ها داستان تعریف کنم. زندگی دارم پیش میبرم داداش، خیلی سخته. پس ویدیو رو تا ته ببین، ویدیوهای دیگرم ببین، تبلیغا رو همه رو ببین، لایک کن، کامنت بذار. من دارم نون 4 تا بچه میدم.
It was such a wonderful fantasy, and so in his head he relived it again and then and again, over and over, wishing beyond hope that it would never end, that he might always feel this free. Surely there's an answer down some new path. Mustn't there be? Perhaps if he played just one more time.
چو بزنم که به خانومم بگم دوستش دارم. I love you PMC.
But there is no answer. How could there possibly be? In reality, all he's doing is pushing the same buttons he always has. Nothing has changed. The longer he spends here, the more invested he gets. The more he forgets which life is the real one.
ببین داره تبدیل میشه به اتاق کار خودم.
And I'm trying to tell him this. That in this world he can never be anything but an observer. That as long as he remains here, he's slowly killing himself. But he won't listen to me. He won't stop. Here, watch this. Stanley, the next time the screen asks you to push a button, do not do it. You see? Can he just not hear me?
No.
How can I tell him in a way that he'll understand that every second he remains here, he's electing to kill himself? How can I get him to see what I see? How can I make him look at himself?
چرا میگه به کشتن خودش ختم میشه؟
Suppose I can't, not in the way I want him to. But I don't make the rules. I simply play to my intended purpose, the same as Stanley. We're not so different, I suppose. I'll try once more to convey all this to him. I'm compelled to. I must. Perhaps, well, maybe this time he'll see. Maybe this time. And I tried again. And Stanley pushed a button. And I tried again. And Stanley pushed a button. And I tried.
کلیدو زدم و مردم. فکر کنم باید نباید انقدم مثلا کرم بریزیم بهش، چون ببین یه جا گیرمون انداخت، چونمون پاره کرد قشنگ. بعدم برگشتیم سر جای اولمون. بیا داداش بیا. چشم بیا غلط کردم من، اصلا گوه خوردم من. بیا قربون شکلت بشم، بیا عزیزم چی میخوای بگی؟ بیا چپ اومدم این دفعه.
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
چشم اینا الان میرم. جمعه ساعت 9 صبح رکورد استنلی، 10 صبح ورزش، 11 هیچ کاری نمی کنی، 12 انیمه وان پیس، 1 ناهار، 2 ادیت ویدیو که تو داری میکنی، 3 شاش، 4 خواب. چه اداره تخمی. ببین سوال امروز ما کی بود؟ یه صدایی دادیم و سوال امروز ما اینه که قرمز نوشته کی میز منو تکون داده؟ کی داره عوض میکنه؟ آقا سلام علیکم.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
اینجا کم بریزیم تو رو خدا. استنی رفت بالا اتاق رئیسش ولی ما میریم پایین. قرمزه یه خورده جهنم نباشه یو.
But Stanley just couldn't do it.
ببخش.
He considered the possibility of facing his boss. Admitting he had left his post during work hours, he might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished.
قشنگ هیچ کدوم از این دلایل نبود که من بودم، فقط کرب داشتم.
And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all. None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. At last, he came to the conclusion that it had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. I'm dreaming! He yelled. This is all a dream.
چه کونی از ادیتور پاره بشه سر زیرنویسا. آقای ادیتور دستت میبوسه. زیاد زوم این زوم اوت نمیخواد بکنی. خسته نباشی. هم زیرنویس دستت میبوسه.
To have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll go back to my boring real-life job pushing buttons. I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid. So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground. Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical star field, and it too appeared. And Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange. I'm dreaming about a voice describing me, thinking about how it's describing my thoughts, he thought.
حاجی این انقدر زل زد و گوه خورد دهنش کف نکرد. شیر مادر حلالت واسه این حرف زدنت تو اینگه. 2 دقیقه حاجی زبون تو دهن نبرده. هی داره گوه میخوره.
And while he thought it all very odd and wondered if this voice spoke to all people in their dreams, the truth was that of course this was not a dream. How could it be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself? Believing that if he's asleep, he doesn't have to take responsibility for himself? Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain, beyond a doubt, that this was in fact a dream. Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream.
حاجی ما تحت کنترل یکیم. این چرا اینقدر گو میخوره 2 دقیقه نمیگی کیه؟ نمیدونیم صدای تو ذهنمونه، نمیدونیم چه اتفاقی واسه همکارامون افتاده، نمیدونیم اصلا این بازی چیه. الان این چه؟ آقا یه کلش به من بدین، یه ایم بذارین رو صفحه یکی رو بکشم. چه گیم تخمیه این؟ خوش اومدید به پارت بعدی بازی‌های تخمی با اسکورپرو. بازی‌های تخمی با اسکورپرو. اسم من
And he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of the world outside this one. Let me wake up.
زنش افتاده روش داره میخورتش.
I'm through with this dream. I wish it to be over.
بابا جایو نمیبینم.
Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please. It's all I want.
نه من اینا رو
نمیخوام. I want my apartment and my wife and my job.
اینا نمیخوام.
All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been.
نمیخوام. من یوتیوبر میخوام باشم.
My life is normal.
نه.
I am normal. Everything will be fine.
تخمم.
I am okay.
هر کی حرفو بهتون زد گوه خورده و دول شد.
Stanley began screaming. Please, someone wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I?
کیا الان میمیرن سکته میکنه.
And everything went black.
قش کردم فکر کنم درسته؟
This is the story of a woman named Mariella.
چه ربطی داشت الان قضیه؟
Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, gathered her belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk.
What?
And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments, she considered the strange man. He was obviously crazy. This much she knew.
What?
Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was to be normal. I am sane. I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what
نمیفهمم داره چه اتفاقی
isn't. It was
میفته تو این گیم.
comforting to think this, and in a certain way, seeing this man made her feel better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for that day.
برو داداش نه وای نسو پامو.
Important people whose impressions of her would affect her career.
باریکلا تو کارت موفق باشی. قرم ساق زنگ آمبولانس بزن.
No time for this. So it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body.
دمش گرم.
And then she
نگاه به
turned
کونمون
and
کرد.
ran.
دیگه انقدر گشاد بوده سازندگی این دویدن زنرم طراحی نکرده. برگشتیم سر جو اولمون. اینم یکی دیگه از اندینگا بود. 19 تا اندینگ داره این بازی. ما 2 تاشو رفتیم. یه دونه کامل اصلا حرفاشو گوش نکردیم. یه دونه هم در چپیه رو رفتیم. راپله رو رفتیم پایین بالا نرفتیم بریم اتاق رئیس. 19 تا اندینگ داره تازه 24 تا اندینگ شده وقتی اولترا دلوکس ما اولترا دلوکس رو داریم بازی میکنیم. قضیه اونجایی پشم ریزون میشه. نگاه کن. این 4 تا استندی پارابله. تمام اندینگاش اینجا اومده. واسه امروز کافیه. امیدوارم خوشتون اومده باشه از بازی. منم خودم هم حال کردم خداییش با این گیم. اگه دوست دارین اندینگ های دیگه هم برم لایک کنین تو کامنت هم انرژی بدین بهم که منم بتره کنم واسهتون. اسم من اسکورپرو بعداً میبینمتون دیگه.